In this lesson, we're going to finish out the hair. Alright, so let's go ahead and create a little bit more detail in the hair. There's a definite separation between the front portion of the hair here. So we need to create a hard line right in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the edge that is on that line. So I'm going to double click that. And if it helps, turn off Turbo Smooth so you can see exactly what you have selected. And let me select this and we'll double click that. There we go. I was a little confused by this selection right here, but that's not in the selection. Let's go ahead and hold down Alt and deselect everything up to this point right here. Now what I want to do here is I want to use the chamfer tool. Now chamfer is going to allow me to split that segment into two if I use one segment here. I'm going to hit OK on that, and then I want to target weld this triangle. So I'm going to right click, target weld from here down to here, and let me pull that back up just a little bit. And then we're going to grab this edge, hold down Shift and select the next edge in line to select that ring, and then we're going to use connect. Connect that with a single segment and hit OK, and then we're going to drag that down in the Z and then pull it over in the X a little bit. Make sure you pay attention to this vertex right here. We want to make sure that that is pulled out in the X and Y a little bit, so that way we get a nice square polygon right here, and raise that up to where it's a little more level. And that's just going to help with the shape whenever it turbo smooths out. So there is that shape that we wanted. So we can definitely see that separation now. If we hit F4, you can definitely see that in there. And that's a nice little element that we wanted to create. Alright, so with that, let's come in and let's create the same thing across the top of the hair. So I just wanted to kind of show that there's some volume in this. So let's go to Edge Mode. Select this edge, hold down Shift, and select the next edge in line to select that entire ring. And we'll just use Connect. Now in this case we can also use Loops Flow Connect, and that will follow along with the shape there, but that's not absolutely necessary, but we'll go ahead and just do it anyway. Let's hold down Alt, left click and drag to deselect all of those points along the back, and including this one. So all I want are just these right here. I'm going to pull that back in the Y, and that's going to create that separation there that I wanted. Then I'm going to take these two along the top and pull that down, and then let's go ahead and straighten up these vertices. So if I hit F3, I want this vertex right here and this one. I'm going to push those back in the X a little bit, so it should kind of start to straighten out a little bit more. And there we go. So a nice little shape. We can come in and continue to work on this a little bit more. If I want to select this ring right here, and I could add another loop, okay, using Flow Connect. Okay, and then I can move it just to create a little bit more detail. Now I'm going to double click on both of those loops there, and actually, excuse me, let's hit Control Z one time. I don't want to select all of those in that loop. Let's deselect all of these along the back, and just these right here along the front. Let me push that over a little bit more, and then I'm also going to hold down Control, select these along the front, pull that over, create a little bit more thickness and a little bit more of a separation, and then go to Vertex Mode, and then just individually shape that hair. So you pull that down. I might be able to pull this vertex up, make that a little bit more of a shape there that I desire. That looks good. So nice and full looking. We've got the shapes that we desire. Okay, just to kind of show that. Looks pretty good. One thing that I don't really like is the shape up here at the top. So I'm going to take that, I'm going to push that in a little bit more. Take both of those at the same time, pull that in. And then let's hit F3, select this vertex right here along the top. Push that in a little bit closer. And then we have two vertices right there. Pull that in. And I'm just going to continue to kind of push those a little bit closer together all the way down up to this point right there. And that should give me a pretty nice shape there. Also looking at the top right here, a little bit of a funny shape. I like this edge. Let me pull that forward. There we go. Okay, so that alleviates that shape there. So we're looking good. Happy with that. And now what I want to do is I want to create the ponytail. So this was going to be pretty easy. We could do several different techniques to create this. I can come in and I can grab a line, and I can left click and drag these lines so you can kind of get an idea of what I'm going for here. We could use the loft tool to do this. So that's one way. I could use a cylinder and I could shape it out. I'm going to go ahead and just stick with the line tool here, and let me go to vertex mode, select those vertices, and right click and change that to Bezier, and then just start grabbing the handles and shaping out this line to the shape of the ponytail of our character. Make sure that's nice and smooth, and then we'll create another shape, which is going to be our circle here. Let's select our line, go to our Create panel, Geometry, Compound Objects, Loft, and then let's select our shape by hitting Get Shape, and there it creates that that shape for our ponytail. Now, it's not flared out, it doesn't have the exact shape of the ponytail, so how do we get that? Well, what I can do is I can go to my Modify panel, and underneath your Deformations rollout, you may have to expand that. You have this scale, and I can turn that on and then hit scale, and it brings up this graph. Now what this means is that the first vertex, which is this point right here, it's going to be consistent. It's going to be at 100%. Now if I grab that vertex, it turns white, and with my move tool active, I can pull that down, and you'll notice how it gets thinner from there at that point. But it stays the same here at the edge, or at the very end, and that's because that's this point here. So what I want to do is I want to take this and I want to pull it up until that is consistent with the size in my reference image. So we'll go to something like 140. We can actually type in that value here, and that's pretty good. Now I need to get the size down here at the bottom, so I'm going to take this point down here, and let's pull that down, and let's get that down to 0. So we'll type that in at 0, and that should come down to a single vertex point. Now everything in the middle is not quite exactly what we want. Well, I could actually add points in here. So I could do this by hitting Insert Corner Point. Doing this will allow me to left click on any point here. So I'm going to go to this 50% line right here, and I'm going to left click that point right there. I'm going to grab my move tool, and I'm going to move that up until that gives me the shape that I need for my ponytail. Now you'll notice that as I start to move this around, it starts to scale up, and if you move it beyond too many points here, you'll start to notice this new segment that it creates. We want to make sure that we're staying on the 50% line. Okay, and then we want to make some adjustments to our value. So I'm going to go up to, let's say, 250. You see how that flares that out. That looks pretty good. We don't have to stick exactly to what we have in here, but there are a few things that we need to take care of. We've got some new segments in here. That's going to be a little bit of an issue. So we can always take care of those points automatically, okay, or manually. Let me say that. Let's take our steps down. Let me take this down to 1, and if you go down to 0, that's going to give you 4 sides, but I want 1. Let's take our path steps down to make that a little bit more rigid and easier to work with. So I believe path steps 1 is going to be the best bet for us. Now that I've done this, you can come in, you can go to your loft and your path. You can reshape it if you need to, but everything looks pretty good to me. So I'm just going to take this object and I'm going to right click and convert it to editable poly. I'm going to bake that down. Now I've got these segments right in here that I want to get rid of. So I'm going to double click on all three of these segments right here in the middle. And I'm going to use my weld function, and I'm going to take that all the way up until those points snap. Now you'll notice that it's not snapping here. So we have a little bit of a different issue that we need to address. Let's take the outside edges, double click on both those and hit Control Backspace and remove that, and that's a different way. The reason that it didn't weld is because it may have had some vertices that were not welded properly to the original segment. They were kind of floating, if you want to think of it that way. So with something like that, I always like to select the vertices and then go ahead and hit weld with a threshold of 0.1. And you'll see that we had some, so let's hit OK. Alright, so now let's take this object. Let's position it over the character's head here, so right in the center. Let's hit F4 so we can see that center line. And I just want to match that there. Alright, so now I've got the shape. We can come in, if you want to, double click on these points, grab your scale tool and scale those individually and create a little bit of a different shape. You can do so. Okay. So we got something that kind of along these lines here. Now let's go ahead and apply Turbo Smooth. You see that smooths out pretty well. Let's go to Iceline Display, we'll bump that up. And then let's go back to Editable Poly. Let's delete the polygon right on the inside. And let's take a quick look down here at the bottom. Now with Turbo Smooth, with triangles like this, it tends to have a little bit of an issue. It has some problems. So what I like to do is I like to create a small point on the end of this. So let's go to Edit Swift Loop, and I'm going to create a loop right here along the end. And it might be a little bit too close. It might be a little tough to create. Let's go ahead and do this. Let's go to Vertex Mode. Select this one vertex, and let's hold down Control and convert that to polygon. Then with that, I'm going to inset. And I'm going to take my inset amount down to, let's take it down pretty low. Something like that. Now that's, well, it's going to tear up our polygons. Don't really like that too much. Let's try something different. Let's see, another way that we can cut. Oh, let me go back to polygon mode, excuse me. Here's what I want to do. Let's hold down Control and let's select Edge Mode, and then let's deselect this loop, holding down Alt and deselecting these points around the top here. So with that, let's use Connect, and let's slide that down toward the end, and let's get really close and hit OK. Let's go to polygon mode and select those points at the very bottom and delete. Let's go to the vertex mode. Let's select those vertices and hit Z so we can zoom in on that and work a little bit closer. Now what I can do is I can go to border mode, select that and cap. Then we'll go to vertex mode. We'll right click and cut across. And then from here to there. Alright, so now that we have that, let's take that point right there in the middle in our left view and let's pull that out. Okay, something kind of like that. And then whenever that turbo smooths, that's going to be a little bit easier to smooth out. It's not going to be quite as tough to smooth. Okay. Alright, and then the last thing to do is to create the hairband that connects the hair. So we're just going to use a torus for this. Go to my front view, left click, and let me click and drag out torus. We'll go to our left view, and we'll position that, rotate it, and then we'll just grab our move tool, we'll position that, And then here you can go to your modify panel and you can adjust the radius of these pieces. And it looks like radius 1 of 2 and then 1 on radius 2 itself. It should be good. You can keep 12 sides, whichever you prefer. We'll change the color to black, and then our material is set to gray. Okay, so now we have completely finished our character here. Now the final thing to do is to add the accessories, and we'll get started in that next.